Shehan, appreciate it. Do you pay much attention, or just the fact that, here's the standings are coming out, react to it much, or do you just kind of look at it and then form your own opinions?
Well, I think for me, the first one of these is always kind of interesting. I do some content off of the rest, so I always make sure to at least keep an eye on it. But I think that the first one is always pretty informative. That's kind of the moment where we figure out, is there a team or is there a trend that maybe the College Football Playoff Committee is thinking of a little bit differently than the AP Top 25 or fans nationally? It's one of those moments where you kind of see, hey, which teams are really in a position to make a run, whether it be, hey, there's a chance for multiple Big 12 teams to make it in. Maybe the ACC is only dealing with one team right now. Maybe it's even the race for the first round bye in the college football playoff as well. So I think that this first one is pretty informative. The ones in between, take them or leave them, but I think the first one is pretty important.
So what do you think of the odds of the Big 12 getting two teams in now that, especially after last week, it is just a bloody mess of a field in the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great positioning for the Big 12. I mean, this is a situation, right, where there's only going to be a certain number of spots available for the Big 12 and ACC, and I'll throw Notre Dame into that boat as well. And so any time that you make your path better, I think is good for you. And Miami picked up a second loss this past week. That was clearly the best overall contender, especially as an at-large from the ACC. And Georgia Tech as well was an undefeated, and now they're out of the way. So suddenly, you can make a pretty good case that BYU and Texas Tech have better cases than just about anybody from the ACC to make the 12-team playoff. I think that even Utah, depending on how they end the year, it's hard to see necessarily a pathway for them to get in, but I think that they're going to be maybe in that top 15 conversation after what they did to Cincinnati last week. And I'm fascinated to see, especially if Utah does rank well, how does that impact a team like BYU that's undefeated and has a big win over them? That's going to be something that's fascinating to watch heading into this week.
Shehan, Texas and Oklahoma staying in the fight, man. I mean, ready to throw some dirt on both their grades at different intervals this season, and here they are. And I know it's a very crowded race still in the SEC, but two pretty massive wins for those programs this past weekend.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think that ultimately, this is a situation where again, in the SEC especially, there's so much leeway not just because of obviously the ability to play your way back in, but also the ability to kind of change over the course of the season. I mean, we saw Arch Manning and that Texas offense play in the first half of the year, and it was just a bad unit. It was a bad offense. But if you're able to survive and advance, you give yourself a chance. I think to those Kentucky and Mississippi State games, I mean, obviously they go to overtime. Texas finds a way to pull both them out. If either of those games go differently, we're not even having this conversation. So much in the college football playoff era, it's just going to be about survive and advance. I think both those teams have done that enough. Now, I will say also, both of them have very difficult ends to the season. I still think that their process to get in to the 12-team playoff is pretty tough. I mean, Texas goes to Georgia next week. They close the year against Texas A&M, who's top 5 in the country. Oklahoma still has to play some of the best teams in the country, including Alabama. But you at least give yourself a chance if you can make it this far with only 1 or 2 losses.
Shehan, college football is as popular as it's ever been before, right? They no matter the arguments, and sometimes that's the popularity, the traditions, massive schools and stadiums and whatever else in ratings. Do you like the way the game is now, despite maybe some disagreements on how they decide who's going to play for the title?
Yeah, I think the game is in a pretty good spot overall. I mean, I think when you go into stadiums on Saturdays, it feels like an incredible product. I think that from a competitive balance perspective, it's been great, actually, that the transfer portal and NIL has kind of balanced the sport a little bit. The one thing that I think is honestly taking away a little bit, and I mean, I say this as somebody who covers the sport nationally, is I wish that we talked a little bit less about coach firings and a little bit less about hot seat and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is, I mean, I'm somebody who gets to see these numbers at the top level. That stuff is what people want to talk about more than anything else. I mean, I'll tell you what, I went on a couple of programs and I would make a pretty good case that between Texas Tech and BYU, I'm probably the guy who knows the most in this world about both those programs. And I wasn't asked about it. I was asked about Hugh Freeze, and I was asked about LSU. And, there's something that's, I think, a little silly about that. But that's more, I think, about the coverage and consumption of the sport. I think that the sport itself is in really good shape.
Steve Sarkisian, in his press conference yesterday, was talking about who you're going to hire for these coaches. I wonder how many people will just take that idea, not that they're listening to Sark, but just the idea of, okay, there's only a couple of like big fish that you're really going to land to win a press conference. How many athletic departments of what will now probably be 20 open jobs by the end of the season will say like, okay, let's stop trying to win the press conference and just hire a guy who fits here. I wonder where that's going to happen. Where do you think the arrow will point?
Well, I think this coaching cycle and this hiring cycle are going to be really interesting, because I think that you're going to be in a position where most of these teams don't have an obvious candidate. So again, for Florida, it's Lane Kiffin or bust, right? I think for LSU, there's kind of no real clear answer at this point. I kind of think that no matter what they do, they're going to be in a weird position, especially, by the way, considering the governor says we're not going to throw out a monster contract the way that we just did. So you think that Lane's probably off the table there. And so I think that that's part of it, right? Is like, we're going to see a couple of really high quality jobs. Penn State, another, right? With Matt Rule and Kurt Cignetti both being officially off the board now. They're going to have to make some unusual hires. And so the question becomes this, because I saw a really smart point. I can't remember who made it on social media the other day. But the reality is this, is that when you do fire a coach, when you do make a new hire, yes, it's obviously to reset the program, but it's oftentimes to reset the enthusiasm of a fan base. Well, we're not dealing with necessarily a pool that's deep enough to suddenly replace 8, 9, 10, 11 win coaches and still feel really good about it. Maybe there's one or two of those situations a year, but we honestly might never have an offseason like we had in 2021 ever again, where USC hires Oklahoma's coach and LSU hires Notre Dame's coach. I don't think it's going to happen very often, especially with what programs can kind of pay out to keep their guys around. So I think that this cycle is going to be really interesting, because let's say, for example, that Florida has to go a little bit off board. Let's say they hire a coordinator. Let's say that they hire a group of 5 coach like Alex Golesh from South Florida. Well, I don't think that all of a sudden your fans are sitting here and thinking we've proven that we're one of the best, one of the elites. I think that you're kind of feeling like, oh, well, that's it. That's all we did this for. And I think that will cause some people to have some pause long term. Now, I think that actually might be a good thing for this sport and maybe for the coaching industry, because again, like I said it the other day, you have to think about not just who is the top guy that you'd get and whether he's better. You have to think about who the 50th percentile candidate that you could get is. And if that guy is a clear improvement over what you have right now, then it might make sense to make a move. If he's not, well, I think that that's a question that you have to ask yourself in a different kind of way. And especially in a moment where compensation to players is becoming top priority, throwing out 50, 60, 70 million dollars to fire a coach, it might not be the best decision.
Shehan, Texas Tech, BYU, massive game in Lubbock, number 8 at number 9, and the Red Raiders are 10.5-point favorites. Last I looked, it may have moved a little bit, 9.5. I see in one place now. What do you think of that? What do you think of the game? What do you think of the outcome? What do you think of all the pageantry that we're going to see this weekend?
Well, to touch on the BYU side to start, I mean, look, BYU doesn't rate very well in some of these, like, the advanced analytics and metrics just because of their style of play. But, like, we saw what they did against Utah. I think that this is a team that, frankly, gets undervalued because they don't necessarily maximize, I guess, their analytic profile, if you want to call it that. But this is a very high-quality team. They've been good essentially everywhere on the field. They've got one of the top 10 rushers in the country in LJ Martin, who apparently is likely to play after dealing with some injury issues. They got a true freshman quarterback in Bear Bachmeier, who's continued to add every single week. They've got a defense that's one of the best in the Big 12. This is going to be a really tough challenge. But But for Texas Tech, this is kind of their crowning moment. This is the moment where College Game Day goes back to Texas Tech for the first time since 2008. It's the moment where you host a top 10 matchup. The funny thing about this Texas Tech team is that they actually haven't had very many good home games this year. Really, their only real home game to this point was against Kansas, and Kansas has been a little underwhelming. This is the moment that Lubbock has been waiting for nearly 20 years. So it's going to be a huge matchup. It's going to be a huge moment. The thing I'm looking for in this game is I think it's going to end up being a defensive struggle. And for Texas Tech, I mean, look, their offensive line has played well, but how will they match up against the BYU rushing defense that's one of the best in the Big 12? Will they be able to keep the ball moving? Will they be able to protect Darren Morton against a really, really aggressive pass rush? But same goes the other direction. How will Bear Bachmeier deal with the best defensive line in the Big 12, one of the best pass rushes in all of college football, led by David Bailey? I think that this is going to be a game where the offensive coordinators are going to have to figure out some beaters to get past some of the front seven guys that they're going to play, and I'm fascinated to see how they handle it. I expect a low-scoring game, but I expect a Texas Tech win.
I do too. I don't know if it's 20-16 or whatever, something like that both teams have the opportunity, but I do too. I think it's going to be more condensed, so to speak.
Yeah, here's my thing on it. There's not many teams I would even give the slightest chance in this scenario to go into Lubbock and win. But BYU, I'm like, I can see it. I can see them doing it. Like, that's the thing.
Keep doing it.
Exactly, man. And they're like you said, you don't walk away going like, God, they're just so impressive and sharp. They just win, man. They just get the job done. And it's not always pretty, but it gets done. And there's just something that I just respect the hell out of about them for that.
Shehan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add so I'm doing a story, keep an eye on cbssports.com for a story on BYU this week, but I spoke to, Kalani Sitake last week, and one thing I pointed out to him is when we had a conversation last year about his team, the thing that stood out to me is that they were not near the top nationally in any major category. They were just a team that was pretty good everywhere and found ways to win. Well, this year it's the opposite. I mean, they have a running back who's top 10 in the country in rushing. They have a quarterback who's ranked the number 3 freshman by ESPN. They have a receiver in Chase Roberts who's near the top of the Big 12. They have a defense that ranks really high in every single metric, and a linebacker in Isaiah Glasker who I think will get All-American consideration. Like, this is a team that was no name last year. Now it's an every name team. And I think that makes them very, very scary going into one of their, probably the second true matchup that they faced all season.
I wonder, so let's say the game is close. Tech is 8, BYU 8, Tech is 9. A lot of it depends on what happens in front of them and behind them. Will both teams, unless it's a blowout, both still be ranked in the top 10 next week?
It's a good question. I mean, it's definitely a good question. I think that I will probably never bet on a Big 12 team to not fall 2 or 3 spots after losing a game, even against another top 10 opponent. But, I think that they will be in that top 11, 12 range if the game is close. Now, I'll say this. I think that BYU has a little bit more room to work with because, 1, they're an undefeated team, and 2, they also will be going on the road in this game. I think if Texas Tech loses this game, they're in real trouble when it comes to trying to make the college football playoff. They'll have 2 losses. They, of course, had a very poor non-conference slate. They have a loss to Arizona State on the docket. It becomes a lot harder. I think that then it becomes you need to find a way to make it to Arlington and you need to win the Big 12. I think that their chances as an at-large are almost doomed if they lose this game. BYU, I think that they're in a little bit better shape.
Shehan, has your opinion changed about Texas after last week?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I think that when you look at this Texas team, they have obvious strengths, they have obvious weaknesses. I think that Vanderbilt, I will say this, I think that actually, yes, Arch Manning has improved, but I think that it's taken this long for Steve Sarkisian, frankly, to work up a game plan that acknowledges some of the limitations of this offense. And you saw that come out against Vanderbilt. You look at Arch's average depth of target through the first 3 or 4 games, it was 12 plus, which was absolutely ridiculous to me. Well, now it's under 5. They're trying to get it to the edge. They're trying to get their playmakers involved. So I do think that that's one piece of it. But the other thing that I'll say is that, look, I think that the interesting thing about being an elite talent team in college football is that it gives you a lot more leeway against teams that aren't elite talent teams. And they're about to have to go play a bunch of elite talent teams in the next couple weeks of the year. So while I do think that they are improved, I think that their offense is structured a little bit better. I still have a lot of concerns about them heading into this home stretch. They still have to play Texas A&M. They still have to play Georgia on the road. These are not easy games. I would pick against them in both of them. And by the way, that's even if they are a top 15 caliber team.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. So you have a story coming out. It's tomorrow, or are you going to put it out
It's on
tonight?
Thursday.
Okay, on Thursday. Okay. Shehan Jeyarajah, thank you, sir.